Hi, this is Cheryl McQueen, designer with Bello's Designs. Today I will be making a card using the new Sweet Poppy, Seahorse, and Seaweed stamp sets. If you like detailed cards, you will have fun with this one. I'll be sharing several different techniques in this one card. Here are the supplies I'll be using today. I have a multifarious Smooth and Supreme cardstock. This one was originally 7 by 7 inches, and I cut it down to be 4.5 by 6.5 inches. We will be using a frame around the edge of our card. I used a basic cardstock for that one. I cut this frame to 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. And then for our card base, I have a cardstock as well that I have cut down to 10 inches by 7 inches and then folded it in half. Our stamp sets today are the new Sweet Poppy stamps. This one is the Seaweed A6 stamp set, and you can see it comes with all kinds of great seaweed and coral and shells. And then we will be using the Sweet Poppy Seahorse A6 stamp set, and this one as well has some nice seaweed with it and bubbles as along with the seahorse. For our inks today, for stamping the images, we'll be using the VersaFine Clair Nocturne. And then for all of our background and coloring in of the seahorse there, we will be using Distress inks. You can also use the Distress Oxide, but I use the Distress inks myself. We'll be using Broken China, Peacock Feathers, Saltwater Taffy, Barn Door, Antique Linen, Mowed Lawn, Vintage Photo, Chip Sapphire, and Black Soot. We'll also be using Distress inks, the sprays, the Distress Oxide sprays. I have two colors that we'll be using today, Mustard Seed and Pine Needles. We will also be using one of the Elements by Lavinia, and this one is the Bermuda. We will be using the Lavinia masking sheets. This is, the Lavinia masking sheets. These are so wonderful when you don't want something to be colored over with your background ink. This is what I did with the seahorse, is I cut out a seahorse and put it on there, and then did my backgrounds, and I'll show you that process. We will also be using a gel plate. I have chosen to use the 5 inch by the 7 inch gel plate. There are several different brands available. This is the one I happen to have on hand, so we'll be using this today as well. We will be using the Peebo Art Gum. This is also a masking medium. If you don't have the one in the jar, you can use the marker, but just be careful because the end is a little bit thick. And for this particular project, we're going to be using it on the little spines, and they're pretty tiny. I will be using the Tim Holtz stamping platform. There are also several out there. Misty is a stamping platform, or several others, but this is the one I happen to have on hand. And I have got a sticky grid down so that I don't have to use magnets. We'll be using some blending tools. We will use the blending brushes as well as a little tiny dauber. I also will be using some paint brushes, a brayer, and a pair of scissors. So let's get started working on our project. To get started working on our project, we are going to take our 4.5 inch by 6.5 inch art card piece. Let me go ahead and move some of these inks out of the way until we need them. I'm going to start out by taking my stamping platform And I'm just going to put my cardstock down. And I'm going to get out my Seahorse out of our Sweet Poppy stamp set that has the Seahorse in it. So what I want to do is I want to take the Seahorse, and I'm not going to center him exactly because I do want to get my Seaweed kind of over to the side a little bit. So he's going to be somewhere right in here. And I will ink him up. Make sure that all the surface of the stamp touches your paper so you get a nice, good, clean image. Alright. Let me put a tiny bit more ink on it. I always like mine to be really sharp and crisp. I think that's actually going to look pretty good. I'll take the stamp off of my stamping platform and set him aside for the moment because we're going to use him one more time. So we can now take him off and we can set this aside. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a mask that's going to go over him so that when we do our background, it's not going to get on the top of him, so the colors don't get too muddled when we actually go to color him in. So I'm going to take a piece of the Lavinia masking sheet. And I've got one that I've already used part of. So we'll take this, and you can either do it on your stamping platform, or if you've got a plate. Actually, I'll go ahead and do it on the stamping platform. But I'm just going to do an image of him. Let's see if we've got enough room over here on this side of the piece that I've done. Let's see. So I'm just going to take my Seahorse and lay him down. And do the same thing. And you don't have to get this one to be a super duper clean one, just enough so that you can see to cut it out. And we're just going to stamp him down on that sheet of paper. Alright, so there we have got our Seahorse stamped on the masking sheet. The masking sheet has it's almost like a masking tape type paper top, and then it's got a clear plastic sheet on the back that helps to keep the sticky, obviously, from getting all over everything. And the nice thing about that is that you can then reuse what you've cut out another time just by placing it back onto the sticky sheet that you cut out. Now with him, I actually had already cut him out. You'll notice that I cut the spines off because they're so tiny and it would be hard to cut around them. So that's where it will come in when we use our drawing gun. But anyway, so this is what I did, and I'm just going to use him again instead of taking the time to cut out the other one. But just cut out around as close as you can so that you'll be able to place your mask on top of the card. So right now, let me go ahead and very quickly just take a paper towel and clean off my stamp. I like to do that as much as I can quickly after I've used it, using this or a baby wipe. That way you don't get your stamp all stained up. Alright, so we will set him aside. And right now we'll set our stamping platform aside. So now what I'm going to do is take this that I had cut out and used earlier. I'm going to peel the plastic piece off of him. It's kind of hard to see the little plastic piece, but there it is. Excuse me, so sorry about that. And now I'm going to lay it down. I apologize for the cough. Unfortunately, in Texas, the allergy season is in full bloom, and I've got a tickly throat today. So anyway, now that we want to make sure that we get that as precisely over our original excuse me, image as possible. And so now we've got him covered up so that we can do our background on top of him and it won't make any difference. So now we're going to take the Peebo art gum and a very fine paintbrush, and we're just going to paint in over those little spines. What this does is it just puts just a fine little layer of the art gum on top so that the color won't go onto that particular spot. All right. So now we're going to take this and set it aside so that the art gum can dry. And we'll move on to working on creating our seaweed. Now, I don't know if you can tell on this or not, but this is the seaweed is actually separate pieces that I have then glued on top. That just gives it a little dimensionality when you're looking at the card. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a piece using our gel press that we will then stamp on top of and cut out those designs. So let's get started on doing the seaweed part. So this part is just a little bit messy, so I have this splat box that I got. This is a Tim Holtz, but you can probably find or make your own splat box to help keep the spray from going everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece, let me find a little piece here of some art paper that was just right here. There we go. So I'm going to take this art card and I'm going to use it to create the seaweed. We'll start out by placing our gel press. I have a little piece of acrylic here. We'll place that down in the splat box. I'm going to take my elements, Bermuda, and I'm just going to run my brayer over the pad to pick up a little bit of the ink. And then I'm just going to run it across my gel press. Just get a little bit of ink. I don't need a whole lot on there. This just kind of gives it a little bit of background color. right, so now I've got that down. I'm going to take my oxide pine needles. You need to shake it up really well. You need to be able to hear that ball rattling around. Mixes up the paint really well. Then we're just going to take that and spritz it just a couple of times over the surface. And then we're going to take our mustard seed, and we don't want very much of the mustard seed, just a tiny little bit, just to kind of give it a few highlights here and there. So just a couple of light spritzes. So now I would like to just go ahead and put a light mist of water across the top. I think that also adds a little bit of interest. Then we're going to take our piece of art card, and we're going to lay this down on top and just press. Let our cardstock pick up that ink. And we will pick it up, peel off the cardstock, and there we've got this really cool looking background that we will create our seaweed from. So I'm going to take the splat box and move it away, and because it is kind of wet, I'll just quickly give it a dry with my heat tool, just so that we can move on. All right. So now we've got the piece that we're going to do some of our seaweed on. So I'm going to use this seaweed piece, which is this one right here, and I'm going to use the big seaweed piece from the seaweed stamp set. I'm going to go ahead and pull out my stamp platform. And we will just put our piece down on that again. And it doesn't really matter what angle this is at, because you're going to cut them out. So we'll lay our two seaweed pieces down there. And then we're going to ink them up with our VersaFine Clair. All right. And there we have our seaweed. So we will take this off and cut them out. And so that you don't have to watch me cut them out, I'm going to go ahead and stop the camera, cut them out, and then we'll move on. Okay, so now I've got them cut out. If you look at the pattern, you can kind of see that I cut some of the elements out of it because I didn't want to have to cut all those little pieces out. Plus, I can place them anywhere I want to. So now we're going to go ahead and set these aside and start working on our background. So we're going to take our Seahorse, some antique linen, and we're just going to start working on putting some sand down at the bottom, kind of the sandy bottom of the ocean. So I'm just going to take that antique linen and just lightly apply it just across the bottom there. So as you can see, I've got my mask on top of the Seahorse, and so wherever I'm doing this ink, it's not going to go on top of the Seahorse. It's just going to go on top of where I've got the masking paper down. Alright, so we've got a little bit of a sandy bottom there. And we are going to grab our broken china and our peacock feathers, and they're very similar colors, but it helps to give a little bit of varying depth. So we'll start out with some of the broken china. Actually, I put the lids on backwards, so we'll go ahead and start with peacock feathers. Let me get the lids back on their right ones. Okay, peacock feathers, we'll start with that. And so we're just going to take some and just start applying it to our background in random spots, because then we will go back in with our broken china on some of the other places, so we get just a couple of shades of color for our ocean. Alright, so we've got just a little bit of peacock feathers down, and now we will move on to the broken china. And I'm just going to very, very lightly kind of go over the whole area. That just helps to blend the two colors together a little bit. So that we've got some varying shades in the ocean water there. All right. I am so sorry about the throat. Thought I was doing okay this morning, and then the wind kicked up, and there go the allergies. All right, so now we're going to take our chipped sapphire, and we're going to add just a tiny little bit in spots, just a few little spots, some darker shades. Again, this just helps to give some depth. By adding different colors and layers like that, it just gives you a little bit more dimensionality to the look of your card, so it isn't quite so flat. Okay, and now we'll be ready to move on to the next step. So before we move on to the next step of removing our mask, I'm just going to go ahead and take my spray bottle here and a piece of paper towel, and I'm just going to kind of spritz some large water droplets on. I think I am going to go ahead and take a little piece of scrap paper because I don't want the bubbles on the sand part. So we're just going to kind of spray it where it's getting big bubbles, big drops on it. Gonna let that set for just one moment, and then take our paper towel and kind of dab up that water. And what that does is that kind of removes some of the ink and gives us just a little bit of a bubbly sea background. Now we are ready to remove our mask. So what I'm going to do is peel up the masking paper that we used, and we will put him back onto his plastic base, so if we want to use him again, his stickiness will be preserved. So set that aside and we can use that another time. Now with the art gum, you just very gently rub your finger over the art gum, and what it will do is it will kind of ball up. Because you're basically just rubbing it right off. I don't know if you can see those little pieces there that I have rubbed up. And then we're just going to take those and dump them out. Wipe them off of our card. And now we'll be able to go ahead and work on the project for getting our seahorse colored in. So for coloring our seahorse in, I'm going to take the antique linen again. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a paintbrush, just one like this, and my antique linen. And with the antique linen, I'm just going to rub it down on the surface of my work surface here. It's kind of hard to see here. I may have to put it over here. Let's see if I can scoot this over so you can see the white portion of my work surface. I'm just going to put, you can't see it very well, but I'm just rubbing some of the ink down on my glass pad here. And then I'm going to spritz a little water beside it so that I can mix the two. So I'm taking a little bit of water on my brush, mixing it into the color, and then I'm just going to put a base color down on him. Using the water and antique linen. Okay, so now we have got just a light little base down to give him a little bit of background color. So now we're going to start working on filling in some of the little squares here. So we're going to start out with our saltwater taffy. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean up on my surface here. Get the antique linen color off so that we can take our saltwater taffy and do the same thing. So we're just going to put some saltwater taffy down, spritz a little water, And I'm going to go ahead and use my small brush again, because we'll be doing smaller areas. So I'm just going to dip in the water and in the ink, and then we'll just basically go and put a base down in all the little squares. Okay, so now we've got just a little bit of that pink color down. Clean up our surface again, and then we're going to add some accents with the barn door, which is just a little bit more of a reddish color. Same process, water with the ink, and then we're just going to go right around where the stamp indicates some darker edges and fill that in with some accent color. Okay, so now you can see that just gives it just a little bit of depth and a little bit more dimensionality. You notice I went ahead and went all in also and added a little bit of that color up on the spines of our seahorse. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and stamp in a few more little elements. Let's go ahead and wipe up so we don't get this all over our card. Spray that down just a little bit and clean it up. And then we're going to go ahead and get out our stamping platform. So I'm going to take the stamping platform. Now after you've done this watercolor bit, if you feel like it's still a little bit too wet, you can always take your heat tool and just kind of dry it up just a little bit, so that you're able to move forward. Alright, so now we will place this on our stamping platform. Let me move a few of my ink pads out of the way so we don't knock them off. And now we're going to go ahead and put our coral in. There are actually a couple of pieces of coral, a large piece and a small piece. So I'm going to take the small piece and place it down here closer to the bottom so that the seahorse looks like he has kind of hooked his tail around the coral for stability. And we will take our VersaFine Clair Nocturne, ink up our coral, I just put a little scrap piece of paper down there so that it doesn't get ink all over my sticky grid. Trying to avoid that as much as I can. Alright, we've got our coral down on that end, and then let's go ahead and put just a little bit of coral coming in from the side here. we'll use our big piece of coral for that. And I think I'll place that over here on this side, kind of coming in. Take the small one off. Pick that up. Let me go ahead and get a little piece just to make sure I don't get it on that side either. All right, and now we have got our coral down, and we'll go ahead and have this be a red coral. So we'll do basically the same thing and just paint it in with our ink, our red barn. And you don't even have to do it solidly. You can just kind of dab it around just a little bit. That just gives it a little dimensionality if you don't have it solid. So you can just kind of touch areas. All right, and then we will go ahead and put in some bubbles right over above the seahorse. About like that. It will probably work. And if you want to give them a little bit of dimensionality, let's clean off our brush here real quick. We can go ahead and take a little bit of the broken china and just put a little bit just around kind of the edges. Again, just gives it just a little touch of dimensionality. Okay. So now we are ready to go ahead and add the seaweed that we cut out earlier. Now for putting the seaweed on, and as you can see, it's kind of got a few very tiny little places here. So I like to use a product that has a very fine tip on the end. So we will see if I can get that. I think it's got a little stopped up there. Let me grab a little teeny pen. Just clear out the top of that. That's a little trick for if you have one of these very fine ones, just take a little straight pin if it gets stopped up, and you can clear it out. So I'm going to go ahead and place this one over here and have it kind of cross my seahorse's body. That just gives it that look of depth. So just take very, very tiny little bits of glue. Oh, looks like I still didn't get all of that out. Let's try it again here. Get that cleaned out. There we go. Alright, so then I'm just going to put a little bit on the back. I do like to thin it out just a little bit because I don't want big globs to kind of squirt out from underneath the edge of it. And then we will just take our seaweed and place it down over the top of our coral and the seahorse. And then our little tiny piece. And place that over him as well. Alright, now if you want to, you can stop here, but I do like to make it appear that there is just a little bit of depth and shadows. So that's where I take my black soot and my little small brush. Let me get the red off of the surface here. I will put the same process, do the same process that I did before, where I put the black soot down and spritz some water beside it, and then we will create some shadows. And basically, okay, so you can hopefully see that. I know when I take the picture it'll probably show up a little bit clearer, but that just added a little bit of dimensionality to the picture. And now we are ready to put our card together. So the last steps here are going to be to take the frame piece and mount our artwork to it. For expediency, I use the running tape, but you can always use your glue as well. Oh, that one ran out. I'll grab another one that's right here, I think. Alright, mount that onto our frame. And then we will mount it onto our card base. And there we have our card, our finished card. I know this was a lot of steps that we went to, but especially when you see it in person, and I think when I take the picture and put it at the end, the colors will really pop and you'll see how beautiful it really is. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial today. I hope you have fun with these new stamps, the Seahorse and the Seaweed stamps that are made by Sweet Poppy, and that you try out the different techniques we used today. Remember to check out the DelBellosDesigns.com website for more tutorials on the design team page. Have a great day.